All right. Let's try this here. First time doing this, so if there are any bugs or errors here, we'll work them out in the future. We are going to look at the Friday and Saturday, March 3rd and 4th system. And we're going to take a rundown of all the models here and just kind of take a look at what's going on. So let's start with the GFS first. I have a love-hate relationship with this model, especially this winter. Well, really the last several winters, but this winter got an upgrade and seems to be doing better. It's a little iffy at times. Either way, this is what we're looking at currently, according to the 12Z GFS. 988 low pressure center just southeast of Long Island. This is notably a little bit of a different track than some of the other models that we will see in just a moment. Not a big shift by any means, but a little bit of a shift. We see the remnants of our upper level low still hanging on out west with a 988 or 990 or whatever you want to, something around that number. Uh, Upper level low to the west, it's really hard for the immediate coastline. And even inland, let's say, I don't know, 15, 20 miles to stay all snow. And I think that's what we're going to see with this particular system is we're just not going to have the cold air in place here for especially the immediate coastline, but a good chunk of central and south Connecticut, Rhode Island, and southeastern Mass. So let's go into a little bit of a breakdown here. Here's the last three runs of the GFS. This is the 12Z, the 6Z, and the 0Z. So as we see, maybe a little bit of a southern shift if you look at kind of the surface depiction of the precip map. Not all that important, but just something to kind of keep an eye on. But this is the main thing I'm watching is look at this upper level low. You see where the isobars extend out. Keep an eye on that region. Again, this is the 12Z, so or that was the 0Z, and this is the 6Z, and this is the 12Z. So we see this the low pressure center here. It does shift a little bit south and east, but the whole precip shield associated with it also is sliding slightly south and east. This is a really inconvenient time for you to be plowing outside. So I apologize if you can hear that. That's unfortunate. But either way, we see a slight south tick from the GFS. It's really more of just wobbles than an actual real shift. But either way, we see the immediate Connecticut coastline. Let's take a sounding. That's an all rain sounding. A little bit of lift here, but all rain for sure here for coastal Connecticut. Let's go kind of northeastern Connecticut. And this is where the forecast gets really, really tricky. Is first off in the growth zone. So this is where our snowflakes form and actually grow. Lots of dry air. So this is instantly a tough forecast due to that. And then we see the warm nose, which this line right here that the cursor is on is the freezing line, essentially. It's 0 degrees Celsius. So we see this red line is our temperature. We see it cross the 0 degree mark, which means that we're above freezing at the 750 millibar level. And then we rapidly cool until about 900 millibars where we start to warm again. And at the surface, we are at 32 degrees at this point in time, according to the GFS. So this right here, more than likely, if we get any form of heavy precip here, this is an all snow sounding. Lighter precip, we could probably see a sleet mix in this case, which is what the GFS is depicting, is a sleet sounding. Fast forward another 6 hours as the low pressure center slides to our east now, and we're getting back on that wind that starts to pull the colder air back in, and we see that warm nose is now gone, but we still have fairly dry atmosphere. So 10-to-1 ratios for southern New England are just not going to happen. We don't have the growth for it, and we're going to be very, very marginal in temperatures, especially at the surface. In fact, again, if we go down to southern Connecticut here, or southeastern Connecticut here, temperatures at the surface are above freezing. This is probably sleet, but it could be all rain. It's actually probably all rain. I don't think that would be a deep enough cold air to bring it back to ice form. So this is probably an all rain sounding here. And it's really going to be a matter of where this coastal front sets up. Again, the GFS is advertising it. Actually, honestly, the GFS, although the low pressure center is moving slightly south, I feel like this boundary, the coastal front, is starting to set up slightly further inland. But either way, the immediate coastline is probably looking at 0 to maybe 2 inches on a high end for this region and through here with the cursor. And then we're going to be looking at probably 2 to 4 somewhere in through this region. And both of those are kind of consist of snow and sleet in this area of southern New England and the Hudson Valley. This is where the forecast gets super difficult. Right there's pure snow sounding, and that looks really good, actually. That's really good snow growth, really well saturated all the way through the column. You'd be thumping pretty good at that point. You'd probably be looking at an inch and a half an hour of snowfall. So either way, that's the GFS. We're just kind of taking a general look at the models here, and we'll look at 500s probably some other time, but I just wanted to test to see if this is going to work. Now let's look at the NAM. You see very different depiction from the GFS here, which isn't a surprise, but also the NAM 3K here is much higher resolution, so that really shouldn't surprise too many people. But this is the same time frame, so 48 hours out, and on the GFS it's also 48 hours out. So we see where the surface low on the GFS is southeast of Long Island. If we look at the NAM, it's virtually over Long Island, and it's really making a drastic difference here. As if we look in northeastern Connecticut, we see that this is very much probably an all rain sounding here, but there's also a lot of dry air in the mid levels and almost no, or actually negative omega, well, positive omega, which represents sinking air, rather than negative omega, which represents rising air. So not a great sounding here for really anything. Probably rain, if anything, but it's probably a dry slot in reality. And that's what the NAM 3K is showing, is a lot drier atmosphere. We have a huge front end thump here. I mean, this would be crazy. This would be very heavy sleet rates. With surface temperatures right at 32 again. So this would be hardcore sleet and an absolute sleet fest. Well, let's look at southern central Vermont. This would be very good snow. We would be, again, an inch and a half, maybe 2 inches an hour here with this sounding here. It's not the most saturated, but it's fairly close. I would like to see these lines kind of meet a little bit better than they do. I don't know what's going on, so I apologize if you can hear all the noise. But we see the NAM's a little bit later with the coastal low developing, and also much more amped with the upper level low. I think it's on a track of its own at the moment. I really don't have a whole lot of faith in it, but it's still important to kind of keep an eye on. This would be very good snow, again, out here in upstate New York. The depiction is trying to show you as sleet, but this would be 100% snow all the way down to the surface, and I can promise you that. For about 480 to 550 is pretty good area for the snow growth. Again, I'd like to be a little more saturated, but it's pretty good for this area. And we are thumping right now in York County, Maine, according to this NAM. I mean, if we get bands like this that actually set up, we're talking snowfall rates of an inch to 3 to maybe even 4 inches an hour, with some of these band, and that's where you're really gonna get your quick hitting snowfall. And that's what the NAM is trying to show, is it doesn't develop that surface low very well on time, and we shoot all of this convection out to the east, and we lose some of that wraparound precip. And the NAM is much drier than most other models uh, with that surface low, and again, fairly similar at this point with the NAM and the GFS. But the big difference comes when you look at the total snowfall. Here's the NAM 3K, and here's the GFS. This is the uncertainty we have at this point going into the forecast that is about 30 hours away, give or take, from its start time. Is the NAM wants to hit central and southern Vermont to basically the north side of Connecticut with the heaviest snow, while the NAM is much further north and actually favors southwestern Maine. But quite personally, I kind of agree more with the track, or at least the snowfall map from the NAM. I don't agree with how it's getting there, but I do agree with it more in southern New England than I do the GFS. I just don't see these totals coming into fruition, especially with how warm the GFS is. I don't know why it's trying to show that. Let's look at the high res RGEM essentially, and this is kind of a mix of both. Much warmer southern New England, especially Connecticut, Rhode Island, and not as far north as the NAM with its precip, but this is also still mid-run. So let's actually look at the RGEM here as a whole. There we go. Oh, no, I can't take a sounding on that. Anyway, let's look at the HER. Let's look at the 12Z HER, which is a little bit colder for longer. We don't have that warm nose on the HER, which means that you pick up some actual significant snowfall, or I say significant snowfall. You'd be looking at probably 2 to 4 throughout all of Connecticut here with the HER. Although big time bands right here, we see the snow growth. This would be a pretty good sounding. You'd be looking at some snow for the vast majority of the event, according to the HER. In fact, we're cooling at the 700s now. Oh, come on. Don't be like this. Yeah, I mean, if the HER is right, you're looking at much more snow for southern New England, keeping that sleet and everything else a little bit further offshore. Thumping. This would be 2 inches an hour probably. But that's a huge if, and then you get dry slotted, like really badly dry slotted on the HER. All the way up into central Vermont would be almost a mix. I wish I could get soundings. But either way, the HER's quite a bit colder, but also loses some precip here as we get that surface low to pop and start developing. Let's look at the 12Z Euro. Basically hot off the press here. So the Euro has been kind of more along the lines of the NAM, a little bit further north and a little bit warmer. I don't like the soundings on Pivotal Weather. They're much harder to see. That's borderline snow, borderline sleet. That could go either way. But you see that placement of the low pressure center is a little bit further west still than where the other models were. Again, close to the NAM, which is basically over Long Island. We see the Euro is a little bit further southwest. And it's trended slightly cooler. Nothing major, but a little bit cooler. It's nothing fantastic by any means. So 750s or 850s or 700s. If huge F-Gen banding on the NAM. Not that it's doing us any good in that category there, but it's warm. The 850s on the NAM are really warm for southern New England. This would be an absolute sleet fest for anyone south of Springfield, Mass, essentially, maybe even including Springfield. Be inches of sleet is what we're measuring this in now instead of just snow. And the 700s are even warmer. I mean, the 700s are warm all the way into south central Vermont, according to the NAM, which is drastically different than some of the other models here. Let's look at the RGM one more time. Let's look at the 850s. And again, really warm here for southern New England. I'm really losing faith that we see snow all the way down to the coastline here. Not to mention, it's just, look at that band. Wow. Anyone in this region would be thumping right now if that's all snow and if the soundings look good. Real quick, I want to look at the NWS blend for snowfall. This is the most recent blend. Ignore this. This is what's falling today. So here's the most recent NWS blend, and I can agree with this for the most part. The immediate coastline would be lucky to see much of anything. And then we get, like I had mentioned earlier, your 2 to 4 range in through this general vicinity. And I think this is pretty much going to be your jackpot zone. I do agree with that. Let's see how that's trended from the last several runs. Yeah, it's been pretty consistent. I think central New Hampshire, western Maine, this is typically the jackpot zones with these kind of setups, and I do agree. Once again, the FV3 is just, it's garbage, honestly. I got nothing else to say about that. So either way, that's what we'll do for now is we'll end it there. Hopefully this worked out as it should have. We shall find out. With any luck, this will all work out and we'll be able to do this a little bit more in the future here. But until then, everyone, I appreciate you watching, and hopefully we get to do a couple more of these as the year goes on, as this is kind of the direction I'm thinking about taking some things. It's just easier for people to sit in and listen, or if you happen to join while I'm live at some point, you guys can ask questions directly there rather than needing to type out answers on some other platforms. So that's my general thought. We'll see how it all works out in the future, but